Today, like I said, we're gonna talk about how to choose crystals for yourself and for others. I apologize if y'all hear the sirens. My office is actually near the fire station, so sometimes when there's an emergency, they go by. So we're gonna talk about a few different ways. We're gonna talk about some of the science ways, right? By properties and correspondences and different things. And then we're gonna talk about some of the intuitive ways. And so we'll touch on both of those. So the very first way that I want to talk to you about is one of the science ways. It's choosing a crystal by its properties. Now, there are over 4,000 and counting minerals and crystals and gems in the geology kingdom, for lack of a better word, right? So it's impossible to know the correspondences and the meanings and properties for all of them. So while this is a really reliable way, it's not necessarily the best way to do it on the fly, right? Like, who has time to, one, either memorize them or the brain space to memorize all that, or two, sit down and look stuff up every time. So I'm starting with this one, and we're going to narrow it down to some easier, more sustainable ways to do it. So one of the very best reference books, mine's well worn, is The Book of Stones by Naisha Ashan and Robert Simmons. And so the Book of Stones is really, really good. The reason why I like it is because it has an index in the back that has physical as well as emotional correspondences. And so you can look up, say, I think it has selenite earmarked here. Now let's go with obsidian. So you can look up obsidian, for example, and it'll give you all the information about obsidian, from the crystalline structure to the minerals to the emotional aspects and the physical aspects. But say you don't know what stone to start with, and you just want to look for unconditional love, for example, or on the physical properties, you can look for depression, and it'll give you all the stone listings for that, what to use and how to use it. So that's a really good book. Now, this one can be a little bit pricey. I think it's about 40 bucks. So that's kind of pricey, but again, it's not something that's updated very often, so you can just get the newest edition. The only other issue is if you have, say, orange calcite like this. This is orange calcite. This is an inexpensive specimen, so it's not going to look the same. The photos in here are museum quality specimens, and it's not always easy to look at this and go, is that orange calcite or is it not? So my backup book for that is this little fella called The Crystal Healer by Philip Permint. There's not like a vowel in the end of his name. But what I like about this is that they're sorted into colors, and the pictures are the kind of pictures that you would find if you were, your average crystal collector, your average mineral collector, just going to buy a stone. So the labradorite looks like the labradorite that you would buy, right? It's not a museum quality specimen. So, and it also has the healing properties, physical and emotional correspondences in it. So these are two really good books that I recommend for that. So we're just talking about choosing a crystal by its properties. And so what you would do then is use one of those books, one of these two books, to say, look up, I had surgery, so I need to heal a broken bone, and you want to use crystals to aid in the healing of a broken bone. You would look that up here, okay? Now, another thing to consider when you look up the properties, like, you can take the book's word for it, or it might be that you know that selenite is a calcium. The mineral content of selenite is primarily made up of calcium. So when you think of what does calcium help with, it helps with bones, right? So anything to do with bones, selenite could be beneficial for. It's another way to think of it, using the properties. Now, the next step from that into getting into less looking it up, less memorizing the properties and correspondences, is something called chromotherapy. And chromotherapy is the science of using colors to adjust body frequencies and body vibrations. And it's the result of being balanced in a chromotherapy manner is health and harmony. So each color possesses a specific vibration, a specific frequency. In fact, that's how we see colors, or that's why we see different colors, is that they vibrate at different frequencies, right? So you can take the color of the stone and match it to the symptom. And one way to do that is through the chakra system, right? And so if you think of the chakra system and the colors they are generally associated with, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, or if you remember, probably, I don't know, fourth grade, maybe third grade science class, Roy G. Biv, right? The colors of the rainbow. Then you can match the stone to the color or the vibration to the symptom, simply by blocking the body off in chakras, right? So the root chakra is from the tailbone down, right? Then the sacral chakra would be between the belly button and the tailbone. Then the solar plexus would be kind of right in the middle. The heart chakra would be right here in the heart area, the throat chakra, the third eye, and then the crown would be above that. So that's one way to do it. So when you think of that, and I'm going to keep picking on orange calcite, because I have a lot of it here for some reason, but orange calcite and the solar plexus chakra, then you think, what's in the solar plexus chakra? Well, your stomach. So say you're having stomach issues, then something like orange calcite, or let me reach over here and grab my citrine, or citrine would be very beneficial in helping to support those systems and those areas of the body. Interestingly, to bring something like tangible nutrition into it, you can also do this with foods. So let's take a common problem in all humans over the age of about 30, stomach acid. So you want to increase stomach acid because a lot of times that starts to decrease after we've had that 30th birthday, around about that time anyways. So solar plexus chakra, right? We're looking at the sun colors, so oranges and yellows. What foods are acidic and also share those colors? Citrus, right? So citrus actually helps to increase stomach acid, which sets off a whole downstream effect of better health and vitality, but that's for a different class. But what I want you to recognize then is, what color are citrus fruits? Well, they're orange, they're yellow. Grapefruits are kind of in between, right? And so it correlates to that body system, to the system where that chakra is, and that all relates back to color. And so stones, crystals, gems, minerals work in the same way. You can use that color to support that area. Another way to think of this is via elements. And I don't mean elements, you can match it by the minerals associated with, but think in a broader term as earth elements. So, a lot of times people say, well, all crystals come from the earth, so they're all earth element. And yes, that's true. But different crystals created in the earth are created by a combination of different elements. And when I say elements, I mean earth, fire, wind, and water, right? I feel like, wasn't there a Captain Planet? Are y'all around the age where Captain Planet was like a good cartoon, Saturday morning cartoon? It was for me, but also Captain Planet had heart. But I'm talking about earth, fire, wind, and water. So if you think of the different elements that are applied to different stones, if you take quartz, for example, and you apply heat, then an iron, then you get amethyst. And then if you take amethyst and you apply even more heat, then you end up with citrine. So it's kind of the same regard. So citrine, again, we're picking on the solar plexus chakra stones. Those actually, citrine is a fire stone. It's a fire element, right? So in the same regard, if you think of the element for growth, right? What color would you associate with growth? So you would want to use something like fire, citrine, to add power to grow, burn stuff off, right? Well, then you would use a green stone for growth. So conversely, you wouldn't want to use a green stone around tumors or fibroids or cysts or something that you wanted to shrink. So far, we've talked about choosing crystals by properties, right? Chromotherapy, or choosing by the color, okay? Chakras, so again, matching that Roy G. Biv down the center of the body, and then sort of planing the body out into sections there to create to use crystals that are associated with those chakras. Elements, so earth, fire, wind, and water. So different crystals have different elements to them. Blue calcite is a water element, for example. Let's see, minerals associated with it. So as we've discussed just a little bit, touched on with the selenite, crystals are actually minerals that come together to form crystals with other elements, right? So you can also know that selenite, for example, is calcium. And so you can know that it would relate to troubles or issues in the body that calcium would help. And then another way to look at that is through emotional symptoms. And so that's where a book like, the Book of Stones comes in really, really handy. But the emotional work, of course, relates back to the physical body. So if you take argonite, for example, and I tried to find examples for you guys to see, hopefully you can see. Argonite's one of my favorites. It's just so unique, right? It actually grows like that, which is cool. But argonite, for example, is really, really great for psoriasis and eczema, right? And so you might think, well, looking at the color, like that's not a very soothing stone. Like nothing about that seems soothing. But energetically and emotionally, psoriasis is related to holding back, holding on to tensions, not letting go of anger and those kind of things. Argonite is really good at releasing, discharging anger and tension, especially subconsciously. So what we can do is use this to help the person move through whatever energetic or emotional tension that they have in order to then heal the body, right? Very, very various ways to use crystals for that. Now, second part, and I think a lot of you guys are interested in this part mostly, is choosing a crystal via intuition. Now, given all that I just said about all the sciencey stuff and how it all correlates in chromotherapy, and there's studies in science, actually, if you've ever read Richard Gerber, MD, he's wrote Vibrational Medicine. He relays a lot of scientific studies that actually correlate to a lot of the things that we talked about there with the chromotherapy and the chakras and the minerals and all the emotional work leading to the physical properties. The next part of that, though, is choosing a crystal via intuition. And often this is the very best way to choose. And once you start practicing it, you start to build confidence in it. And then it's kind of fun to choose intuitively and then go back and check your reference book and see if you're right. And most of the time you are. And that'll just help you build more and more confidence in that inner guide and that intuition. So that intuitive hit, it can be as simple as the first stone you think of when something comes up. And the weird part is this intuitive hit is often ignored. And even for me, and I do this all day, every day. So for example, I rarely get sick, right? Less than once a year. Easily I can think, well, I didn't sleep so well and trace it back, right? So not too long ago, I woke up with a little bit of just a tinge of swollen lymph nodes, like here in the neck, right? And I thought, oh, that's kind of weird. That doesn't happen very often. Keep going about my day. And then a little while later, the thought pops into my head, where's your celestite? And then it comes to my consciousness again later, and I keep just kind of moving past it. Very busy. I have patients to see, all that stuff. Just keep brushing it off. Later on, about the time my head hits the pillow, same thing comes up, like, where's your celestite? As I'm drifting off to sleep. Now, the next morning I wake up, my lymph nodes are even more swollen, and now you can kind of see them, right? They're really tender. And so I get this like really strong, go find your celestite. Finally, I heeded the warning, went and found it, voila, slept with this little beauty. This is actually part of the little beauty. I broke it on accident, so it came apart. The matrix just kind of broke, but slept with this celestite in my pillowcase and carried it with me on my person, in my bra, in full transparency, and all of it was gone in about 24 hours. Likely, if I had heeded that warning the very first time, 2 days before that, I probably would have never progressed to having the really swollen lymph nodes. So I tell that story to really illustrate the power of those intuitive nudges. And again, we're so busy that we often ignore them. And I could give you bigger examples about those intuitive nudges. That's just a small one. It's a really powerful way to choose a crystal. And it's just to simply go with your first intuitive hit. Go with your first nudge, your gut instinct. And it's also the easiest because, as I said, there's over 4,000 of these things, 4,000 different kinds, all over Mama Earth, and more are being discovered every day. So it's just about impossible to keep up with. It is impossible to keep up, even with a good, a broad depth of properties and correspondences and that sort of thing. And once you get the hang of it, it's really easy to continue in that method. So sometimes when I talk about that method, people say, well, I don't get an intuitive hit. I don't get anything. And so here's a way to fix that. Anytime you get a new crystal, anytime you bring a new one. So those of you that have gotten your crystal gifts from us at Gemstone Well, take those crystals, even if it's something that you feel like you know what the correspondences are, something common, like rose quartz or clear quartz. I think I brought some clear quartz. Yeah, I brought a little bit of clear quartz. Or, amethyst even, something that you have a good idea, or you think you have a good idea of what the correspondences are. And carry it with you for 3 days. Now, if you're like me, you have crystals everywhere, right? Like I have amethyst on my necklace. I have moonstone on my ring. So in order for this to really work well, you want to not wear the rest of your crystal jewelry. And maybe even if you have a lot of crystals in a small space, either avoid that small space or move those crystals out. But you simply carry your little crystal friend with you, even if it's one you've had for a while, for at least 72 hours. Now, you may not get any big like aha moments, but you'll do two things. You will entrain with your crystal and your crystal will entrain with you. So you will work better with that stone or crystal or mineral or gemstone, as well as if you'll just keep a little journal of different things that happened, things that came into your awareness, thoughts, intuitive hits, nudges, and then go back after those 72 hours and look at those, then it'll give you a good idea of what the properties are of that stone. Now, if I don't know the properties of a stone, or if I get a new stone that comes home with me, or I order, or I shop for, or sometimes people send them to me, then I do that with each new stone I get, because just because you have two quartz crystals, so here's a cut quartz, double terminated quartz, and then here's a cluster. They're both quartz, but they both have really different properties to them. I mean, they have the textbook properties of what quartz are, but they also have really different intuitive properties. So I use these two things for different purposes, personally and professionally. So that's something to think about. I'm going to grab my pendulum, my fancy rolly chair, because that's the next way I want to talk to you about using crystals, okay? Okay, so I don't know if you guys will tell me in the comments if you guys are familiar with using something, there, now it's in the frame, like a pendulum. And this is a really classic looking pendulum. They don't all have to be that way. And if you don't have one, you can use a necklace, right? See how it swings? Works like a pendulum. You can use car keys, which I don't have any handy, but just about anything works as a pendulum. Now, using a pendulum to choose a crystal for yourself or for others is very, very simple. First, if you've never used your pendulum before, or if you're using, a necklace or, car keys or a paper clip on a string, for example, then you want to check in and you want to see what your yes and no is. Now, my elbow is not on the surface, otherwise you can see my pendulum. So I will probably move, but you just check in, and ask for a clear sign for yes. And my clear sign, most people's, well, I won't say most, 60% of people's are the same. But for me, yes is back and forth. And then a clear sign for no, no is left and right, right? And then a sign for need more information, or there's not one that's better than the other. It's often a circle or a diagonal swing. So this is a pendulum. Y'all let me know if you have one, if you use one. But the way to choose which crystal might be for you with something like a pendulum, it's going to be hard to demonstrate, but you can see the argonite and the orange calcite. Now, you can either ask to show me which one is for me. So it's pretty clearly moving back and forth for yes here. And it's a much smaller swing here. And if I sat here long enough, or if my elbow is balanced, it might go well, there it goes, left and right. Again, this isn't going to be super accurate because my elbow, there's too much play without my elbow on a sturdy surface. But that's a really clear way to choose. Now, we don't always have something that we can use for that, but you can use your entire body. I do this a lot with my clients and patients, not just for crystals, but for lots of different things, but it's called muscle testing or energy testing. It's a snapshot of a picture in time. So, when you go to a practitioner and they energy test and they say, you should never use orange calcite, or you should never take this supplement. I'm not a big fan of that. So I like to empower people to know themselves, to teach themselves how to muscle test. And one way that you can do that is by taking whatever it is, the crystal, putting it over your heart, and then you stand really, really balanced, feet together. And then usually it's the same movements that you get on your pendulum. So forward is yes, to the side might be no, diagonally, and your whole body will just lean that way naturally. If you can just take a breath and relax your body to do so. That was choosing a crystal using a pendulum, or you can also call it dowsing. I like to call them pendies for short. And then also choosing a crystal via muscle testing. So muscle testing, if I were going to muscle test somebody else, I would ask you to hold the crystal in your hand. I would put one hand on your shoulder, and then I would push down on your hand or on your extended arm, and I would be asking your body to tell me if this resonated with you or not. Now, that being said, I wouldn't want to test that and then you forever, if you tested that you didn't need argonite today, forever and always, you think, oh, well, I'm not going to use argonite. But, so I like to teach people how to do it themselves. And so what I'll have you do is stand up nice and tall, feet kind of close together, hold the stone in your hand over your heart, take a nice deep breath, and then close your eyes. And your body will gently move forward or backwards or to the side. And that is a way, once you check your signs, like I said, you're going to want to stand there and ask for a clear sign for yes or no. And this can be a little bit different for everyone. Then you will get to notice what your body wants right now. And you can do this with crystals. You can do it with gemstones. You can do it with food. So if you're standing in the fridge and you think, gosh, I want an apple, but for some reason you're not quite sure, you can hold the apple. Your body will tell you. It'll lean into the apple if that's something that your body needs. Those nourishments, that nourishment is an energy your body needs. And it's the same thing for crystals and stones. What we have covered is choosing a crystal by its properties. We talked about chromotherapy and chakras. We talked about the earth elements, minerals associated with crystals, and then that's kind of the science half. And then the intuitive half is choosing the crystals via your intuition, via muscle testing, and via something like a pendulum.